Welcome to the Wild and Fierce podcast. We are your hosts, Amber
and Johanna. We're here to explore womanhood through real, raw, and unfiltered conversations.
Please remember this podcast is for education only and not a substitute for medical advice. Always consult your own healthcare professional.
Let's dive in. Hello, guys. Super exciting announcement. I am pregnant, and we're going to dive into everything that I did for preconception prep. I'm going to talk about everything and all things first trimester, which I shared. Amber was like a huge piece for me getting through my first trimester, so I'm very happy that she's here helping me navigate this. But we're just going to kind of dive in and talk about everything that I have just gone through over the past, I'm 16 and a half weeks now, so 16 and a half weeks. And just dive in. I really wanted to do this episode. I think we both really wanted to, but I know I really wanted to do this episode because I listened to someone else's doing an episode when she was 9 weeks pregnant. And to be completely honest, I thought she was being really dramatic until I entered 9 weeks of pregnancy, until I entered it myself. And honestly, so I was in my first trimester in January this year in 2025, and I don't even know how many times I went back thinking to the episode that I listened to because of this woman that she released this information. It was so helpful just to hear about, she did not just talk about yay, I'm pregnant, I'm so excited. She talked about it sucking a lot. And I feel like we don't have a lot of outlets to do that, where we can really hear people just talk about how much it can suck. Does it have its brilliant and beautiful sides? Absolutely. But there's also a lot of hard parts to it. And I constantly go back to thinking about that episode. So I'm so thankful that she released it. I've been meaning to message her and just thank her. So I'm hoping that this episode is that for other ladies, just because it is hard. It is a hard time in your life. It lasts days and days and weeks and months. And oftentimes when you're in it, you feel like, is this ever going to end? And it will. It's temporary. And that's something that I kept telling myself. But I want to talk about it because there's a lot going on. And I also feel like in our society, we don't often want to complain about things. And this is where Amber came in clutch for me, because she was allowing me to just complain. And I think we don't want to feel like a burden on other people and complain. And then we also think that other people don't want to hear our complaints, where I don't think that's necessarily true. But I think it's really awesome that we have outlets like podcasts now where we can deep dive things a little bit more in depth, especially with topics like this, when it's the first time you're going through something. So that's kind of that. Amber, do you want to add anything? And otherwise I can just dive in.
I just wanted to add, this is the super cliche saying of you don't know until you're in it.
Yes.
So true. Just if you compare it to your friends that have kids and you think you can understand it, you don't until you're there. And it's the same way with pregnancy. I could try to explain to someone that's never been pregnant what it's like, but until you've been in it, you don't really know. And I think it just speaks so much to our mission of having real, raw, and unfiltered conversations. That's why we're here. So. All right, kick it off. I'm excited to hear. Obviously, I've heard most of it, but
you
want to hear the full story.
You've probably heard more than most people. Yeah. No, I really feel like it's something that you don't know until you know. And what's interesting is I work with pregnant ladies, guys. I work with preparing for conception. I work with a lot of clients when they get to first trimester. I knew that it was going to be hard 100%. But and I've been doing this for years at this point. And even that, I listened to this other woman's episode and she was talking about how hard it was. And I thought she was being dramatic until I was in it. And then I was like, whoa, I'm so humbled right now. This is way harder. It's not just physically hard, it's emotionally and mentally hard. And I think the mental aspect is what really got me. So anyways, yeah, you don't really know until you know. But I also think that it's such a blessing when women share their stories. So then I'm going to kind of rewind a little bit. How many times do you go through something and you're like, no one talks about this, or I wish I knew, I think that happens a lot with miscarriages. I was just talking to a friend that had a miscarriage and she was like, no one told me that when you miscarry, you have contractions and that you actually go through a mini labor, depending on how far along you are. And it's that weird conundrum of it's because we don't want to complain. It's because we don't want to feel like a burden. We don't want to talk about these things too in depth. But then it makes it so women go through things and they don't know. They don't know what to expect. They don't understand that you can have contractions even with a miscarriage. And, or like they don't understand the mental, emotional, and physical challenges of first trimester. I seriously, I work with so many women. I have a lot of friends that have been pregnant. Like I just went through 2024 with two very close friends of mine going through their first trimester. So I'm like surrounded by this way more than the average woman, and I was still shocked going through it on my own. So it's definitely, you don't know until you know, but hopefully this helps prepare you a little bit. And then also, Amber, you've gone through two pregnancies
Yeah,
too, so feel free to pitch in and if there's
totally.
anything that you were like, I had this experience too, or I had a different experience, but it could still be very helpful.
That's
So
one thing I should add really quick too is everyone's pregnancy journey is going to be so different. So like when you're listening to Johanna's story, if you're like, well, that's not what mine was like, or like mine was way harder, or mine was way easier, that is totally okay. Like the spectrum of pregnancy is like a million miles long. So like both my sisters right now, my sister-in-law and my sister are both pregnant right now. And like their two pregnancies are completely different.
yeah,
So just keep that in mind as you're listening to. That
yeah,
may not look just like Johanna's does.
yeah, totally. Yeah, you may be feeling amazing.
Or even worse.
Maybe
Like,
not.
yeah.
Like I feel like I was very much so in the middle ground.
Same.
But yeah, so love that point. Everyone's pregnancy is different. Everyone's menstrual cycle is different. Everyone's birth is different. Everyone's breastfeeding journey is different. And I think that's why it's so helpful to have many women share different stories so you don't feel alone. It's not supposed to look just one type of way. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to chat a little bit. I want to talk about my preconception journey a bit because that is what we do at Wild Muse. And I want to like guide you through how I did that in my own journey, in my own body, and what we did for my husband as well. So we're gonna go through that. I also want to talk about the importance of prepping for conception because that is something that is very lost in our society, and I think it's really doing like some damage to a lot of couples' experience with getting pregnant. And even beyond with like health of our society, like we really aren't preparing for conception. So I want to talk about that a little bit. I'll talk about like what it means to prepare for conception. Like we're going to talk about nourishment. We'll talk about the physical aspect. Amber's going to share some things with that. We'll talk about some supplements. I'm going to like just briefly touch on some supplements. I do not want you guys to hear the supplements that I was on and then go and fill your grocery basket with those same supplements. We are all bio individual. Like what I needed was based off of my own lab work. I ran my own blood work and my own hair tests. So that's what I needed. Same thing for my husband. It's what he needed. We're all different. We all don't need to take the same prenatal. We all don't need to eat the same diet. You really need to understand that every body needs something different. Just like every body's experience is different with pregnancy and birth and stuff like that. Everyone needs different things too. So we'll talk about supplements, but just wanted to give that little bit of a caveat. And then Amber wanted me to cover like early pregnancy symptoms of like how I knew that I was pregnant. And then I'm going to do a first trimester recap. And we're going to try to fit this all in 60 minutes. I'm going to do a first trimester recap. This was what was really helpful when I listened to someone else's recap because it gave me some like rough guidelines of like, okay, like, like I remember Amber told me I like started feeling a little better after week 10. That wasn't necessarily my case, but it did give me like a little bit of like hope.
Yep.
So that was really helpful to hear that. And then I am actually going to go through first trimester symptoms and what I did to support them. Once again, this is what worked for me. And I'm going to say that again when we get to that section. This is what worked for me. It's what worked for some of my clients. It may not work for you. And always, always, always talk to your own healthcare professional, please, before making any of these changes or suggestions or implementing anything. So that's what we're going to cover. Amber, is there anything else? Otherwise, I will just dive into preconception stuff.
You're good. Go for it.
Okay, sweet. So preconception prep. What does that mean? It literally means preparing your body for conception. It's something that I think our society has really, really gone out of touch with. As a society, I feel like because we have Amazon and we can get packages delivered the same day now. It's not even 2 days of delivery. It's like I can go on, if I spend more than $25, it'll be here this evening, which is crazy. We live in a society of instant gratification. We do grocery pickups, we have Amazon, we have our phone to keep us distracted. We can get any song on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. We can, There's so many things. Also, guys, pregnancy brain is real. I will definitely be forgetting things throughout this. But I feel like there's so many things that our society, like we just have at the tips of our fingers. We can pull up almost any movie we want, almost any TV show on demand. Like people don't even like stream, I feel like, on normal like cable anymore because we can just do streaming services and we're so used to the instant demand, right? I also think because we do have our medical system, which I'm just going to reiterate, thank God for the medical system for what they do well, right? We love them for emergencies, we love them for surgeries, we love them for accidents, life-saving things. A lot of the things that the medical system has brought into our society, though, is instant gratification. Ozempic, like that's a really big conversation. But you can take a pill and you roughly know what to expect in the next 4, 6, 8, 9, 10 weeks, whatever. Birth control pill, we know what to expect when you take that. Advil, it kicks in 20 minutes. We get that instant gratification of the headache is gone. So I feel like our society really has lost the skill of patience and intention, unfortunately. And we're very reactive. We don't prepare. We don't plan for things. And I feel like for a lot of us, unfortunately, life kind of is happening to us rather than us being an active participant in our life. Do you want to add anything to that? I know that you probably have some thoughts, and I'll kind of tie that into like how that has to do with conception as well.
So I was actually listening to a podcast yesterday talking about this exact topic, and I really just want to highlight that when you decide to get pregnant, we wouldn't recommend just like, okay, let's conceive right now. Like, I just want to emphasize the importance of preparing for conception.
Yeah.
And that's something that I will be completely honest. When I got pregnant with Emmy, I didn't freaking care about that. I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, I literally got off birth control and was pregnant like my next cycle.
Yeah.
I had no clue. And like, if I could do it over, I would have done things so differently.
You
So
don't know what you don't know.
no. So like, if you're listening to this, please understand how valuable it is to prepare your body, not even for your own self, but like the health of your baby,
Yeah.
the success of your pregnancy and your partner too. Like
Yeah.
they're just, and Johanna will emphasize this too, but like they're just as much a part of the puzzle as you are. So
Mm-hmm.
like just please take this as like really important information to plan before you decide to conceive.
And it's something, honestly, that our society and our ancestors did, like, up until recent history. Like, I don't know off the top of my head. I should have looked this up, but there are, like, communities that would spend an entire year really, like, nourishing and taking care of women that are going to become mothers, going from maidenhood to motherhood, and they'd spend like a year preparing their body for conception. So it was something that a lot of our ancestors used to do, and it's really a lost tradition. And I think that we are seeing and going to see the consequences of that, unfortunately. But yeah, just like Amber said, because we live in that instant gratification state in society, we're also told that, oh yeah, just get off birth control and expect to get pregnant the next month. Like Amber, sometimes that works. And honestly,
Not always.
and it doesn't always work. But luckily, your firstborn's pretty healthy and everything worked out fine. It doesn't always, though. And I think that's where it gets even more confusing because it's like someone that's like, well, that's what my doctor told me what would happen. And now I haven't been able to get pregnant for a year. What's wrong with me? It worked for Amber. Why isn't it working for me? And it's
Exactly.
because we're all individuals and we all have different things and different needs and how your body handled birth control and stuff like that. How is your husband's health too? Like that plays a big role. So we do very, very little to prepare for conception now, unfortunately. And if you think about it this way, we plan 6, 8, 9, 12, 24 months in advance for our weddings, right? But then we don't plan anything to do the biggest event that your body will ever do. Like I was talking to my mother-in-law, she was like, I can't think of anything that your body goes through that's as like complex as pregnancy. Like with pregnancy, it's like your digestion changes, your hormones change, your brain changes, your blood volume changes, your like the way you absorb nutrients changes, you're building a human. That's something that your body's never been.
Your spine
Organs move,
changes, literally everything. Your
your
feet
skin
grow.
changes. Yeah, your skin changes, like everything changes, guys. I think the closest thing would probably be like getting hit by a car and like having like many, many bones broken and like having to be not that I want to compare pregnancy to that or like compare pregnancy to like being in the hospital from that, but it's like that's how much work your body is under, or like that your body's having to put in that amount of work in order to build a human. And it's because it's so mundane and so normal, and we were all here because of a woman's body that did this for us. It seems so normal and like we're just humans and it's supposed to happen. I think that it's become like, oh yeah, it just women get pregnant and that's just what it is, right? We like have almost like lost the like mystery and like beautiful like I'm like the word is not pregnancy brain, guys. The word's not coming to me.
We've
But
made this like magical thing too simple.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's like very mundane because we're all here because a woman got pregnant, which is wild. But then it's also 100% it's pure magic. Like
Totally.
it blows my mind. I just watched a video on Instagram last week of the neural tube starting to form. Oh my God, it literally looks like fireworks.
Uh-huh.
It's incredible. And it's like, you guys, like, this is literally magic. So, anyways, it's crazy. It's like we plan how long do we save to buy a house? How long do we
Right.
prepare for a wedding? How long we spent 18 years learning things in school to then prepare to go to college for people that go to college, right? You spend a long time thinking about what you want to study in college. But then with pregnancy, which is like the biggest thing that you'll ever do, it's just like, oh yeah, I'll just get pregnant,
And we
right?
need to think about how much time and energy we put into decorating the nursery. Like
100%.
I tell clients all the time, if you took the same amount of time and energy and money that you put into your nursery and invested that into your own body and your own health, you'd be so much better off than putting it all into this fancy nursery. Do I love cute nurseries? Sure, I do. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But like we spend so much effort on that and then we neglect our own
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then a lot of us have like really poor pregnancies
Yeah.
or like poor birth outcomes, or, you know, like babies have poor health outcomes. And then we're kind of taught that there's nothing that you could have done. It's just the way it is. And I just think that's like a much bigger conversation of like, there's so much like just kind of like wrong with the approach. And it's not one woman or one couple's fault. It's like how our society has been shaped because of many, many factors
For
that
sure.
become an issue. So when it comes to preparing for conception, for wild mews, what we recommend is no less than 6 months if you can control it. I do want to say this. It's never too late. So even if you're currently pregnant, you got pregnant like without trying, or you just didn't know, you know, like Amber, like you didn't know what you didn't know, just do your best now. Like something is always going to be helpful. But if you have the luxury of time or planning and you track your fertility and you know when you want to get pregnant, um, if you can spend no less than 6 months, like sometimes you'll see 3 months out there, and man, it takes 3 months just for egg and sperm health to change. I would recommend 6 months at minimum. If you can, do an entire year of preparation. The reason being is once again, I just want to reiterate, your body is making a human being. Like you are making organs from scratch. You're making bones from scratch. It's incredible. And it takes resources to do so. And a lot of women are in a constantly stressed, malnourished, because they undereat, they constantly go, they don't digest well, and they've been on birth control, which has depleted a lot of things for their bodies. You're entering pregnancy in an already depleted state. And this is the most taxing thing alongside breastfeeding, like the most taxing thing that your body can do. And I don't like, I want that to, it's a beautiful privilege that it's a taxing thing, right? Like it's something that I'm deeply honored that I get to be on and I get to go on that. But it is still very taxing. I want to make sure my body is supported as I go through it. So throughout pregnancy, mamas give around 10% of their mineral stores, which equates to 4 pounds of minerals to baby. So if you're already slightly magnesium deficient, which a lot of people are, or if you're slightly B vitamin deficient, or if you're slightly potassium deficient, which a lot of people are, you're then going into even a further deficit, and you also imprint your nutrient levels on baby too. So that means that their life is starting with excess or deficiencies or whatever, which is why I feel like the prenatal supplement kind of came around, because they're like, oh, this is great. You can take this and it'll fill all your nutrient gaps. That's unfortunately just not how nutrients work. And I think it's kind of like that same thing of we're wanting that instant gratification, that quick fix, a one simple thing to take. But guys, that's like getting like planning your wedding and just getting the wedding dress. It's
Very
like you're
simple.
missing the entire point. You need to eat well, you need to sleep well, you need to like be aware of your boundaries, or at least this is, in my opinion, I feel like this is would set a lot of women up for success. Work on your mindset, work on your pelvic floor, work on a lot of those things. So I personally started late 2023, early 2024 preparing for conception, but I want to add a little caveat because I do what I do and I work on cycle health and period health, which your period and your menstrual cycle is your fertility. So we'll do an episode on this, but like you can look into your menstrual cycle to see where your fertility gaps are and where you can make improvements. So I've really been working on my fertility since 2021, not with like the thoughts of like, oh, if I get pregnant anytime, like great. It was more so like, no, I don't want to get pregnant. I don't want to get pregnant for a few years. But I do know that supporting my fertility is supporting my menstrual cycle. And if I support my menstrual cycle, then my month to month is a lot better than if I don't, right? So I really would say that like once you start nourishing yourself and taking care of yourself, you are already preparing your body for fertility. I like to give the example of fertility equals vitality, which is your life force. So the more vital you are, the more fertile you are. So we want fertility even if you don't want to get pregnant because you want to be vital, you want to be glowing and nourished and robust, right? And live a vibrant lifestyle. So I really did start, quote unquote, preparing for pregnancy in 2021. But I wouldn't say that I like really started doing some extra stuff until about a year away from us thinking that we might want to get pregnant. And then I kicked it up a notch with some extra egg support and sperm support for my husband in summer 2024. I'm going to hand it over to Amber though, because she was actually kind of the start of my preparing for conception because I wanted to work on pelvic floor stuff. So I'm going to have her, she's going to explain that so much better than me. So I'm going to have her explain that and take it from there, and then I'll jump in after that.
Okay. So this is another misconception that we have just in the world in general is that you shouldn't work on your pelvic floor or birth prep, stuff like that, until you are either A, symptomatic, or B, done having kids. And that is all totally wrong.
Yeah.
Don't fall for that. So at Fierce Not Fragile, one of my biggest motivators is educating and empowering women on their pelvic floor at all stages of womanhood. Like even my daughter who was 5, we work on diaphragmatic breathing and like pelvic floor relaxation now with my 2-year-old who we're potty training. I am teaching him the same basic pelvic floor, obviously through a 2-year-old's eyes, like breathing stuff that I would a mom, because we all have pelvic floors and we all need this stuff as like a foundation. So that's kind of a background. So with Johanna in particular, and with all of my clients, everything I do is fully customized. So when Johanna comes in to work with me, we start with an assessment, or anyone that does. So I'm not just saying, here's a cookie cutter 5 pelvic floor exercises, go do these. Because example, let's say that someone comes to me and they have like a really tight pelvic floor, and I'm like, here, do a bunch of Kegels. They're probably going to get a heck of a lot worse. Okay. So what works for one does not work for the other, which is why the evaluation that I do with all of my new clients is so important, because I need to know where are the strength points, where are the weak points. For Johanna in particular, we knew that her adductors and abductors needed a lot of work. We knew that there was some rib flare stuff we were looking at. We needed to look at some breathing patterns. So knowing the person on an individual level makes such a difference when it comes to pelvic floor strength training and just like fitness and wellness in general. So we started with that. We figured out where were her weak points. Go ahead.
Why don't you give them examples of how you knew those are my weak points? Just so if, for the people listening, like they might be like, oh, that means that I need to work on my pelvic floor stuff. Because I don't think I would have known that. Like I was having really tight inner thigh,
Hmm?
kind of like gripping is the best way that I can explain it. At that time, had no idea it was connected to my pelvic floor. So if you can give people some
Yep.
examples.
Yep. So but a lot of people probably don't even know what even adductors and abductors are, so I should probably just preface that.
Inner thigh, outer thigh.
Yeah. Okay. So inner thigh and outer thigh muscles. When you think of the pelvic floor, which our next episode, you guys, is going to be pelvic floor 101, where I'm going to like nerd out on you guys on all this stuff. But the inner and outer thigh muscles are like the pelvic floor's BFF. They all work together. So when you have muscles like Johanna's, specifically her inner thigh muscles, were very, very weak When a muscle is very, very weak, it often feels very, very tight or like grippy is a way you can say it. So she just felt like she always needed to stretch it or was always pulling on one side. So typically when we see this, this is a sign that the muscles need to be strengthened. When muscles support that are supposed to be supporting the pelvic floor aren't doing their job, the pelvic floor then goes into hyperdrive. So you'll start having more like pelvic floor tightness, maybe some glute weakness. It can even affect like your ribs and your breathing patterns when certain muscles aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. So when clients come to me and they have muscle groups that are acting in a certain way, and I know that those muscles interact with the pelvic floor, I'm not just going to say, okay, let's work on the pelvic floor. We need to work on all those muscles that support the pelvic floor so that the system can then start working together. So for Johanna in particular, we had to really work on pelvic floor relaxation and down regulating the nervous system through diaphragmatic breathing and things like that, while also working on supporting and strengthening things like her adductors, abductors, inner outer thighs, deep core, hip flexors, stuff like that. So you have to treat the whole system in order to support the pelvic floor because the pelvic floor is working all day long, like
Mhm.
subconsciously. You don't know that it's working. If you're not peeing your pants right now or pooping, your pelvic floor is working. Like
You're
when you
not
walk,
urinating yourself in your car right now. On the floor.
yeah, when you walk, when you cough, when you sneeze, like all your organs in your pelvis right now are held up by the pelvic floor. It's like it's working constantly. So when we tell women to like wait till you're done having kids or whatever to take care of it, you're missing the mark.
Yeah.
And the other thing, especially for preparation, is like the pelvic floor plays a huge role in supporting your uterus and baby during pregnancy. And then it plays an even more important role when it comes to birth and being able to relax the pelvic floor. So those were kind of some of the main things. We've go ahead.
I want to add that working on the pelvic floor after you're done having kids is like, and I'm going to use the word prenatal here just because I feel like people understand, is like taking a prenatal after you're done having kids and not caring about eating or sleeping or hydrating at all during any of your pregnancies. It's kind of like, is it going to help? Sure, maybe a little, but you're like starting like way like later than like it's going to go, the progress will go way, way, way slower than if you can get proactive. And there's going to be some ladies listening to this and they're like, well, I'm in my 40s. I've already had babies. I didn't know. Once again, you didn't know, but you didn't know. Now you know. Okay. And that doesn't mean you can absolutely do stuff. The body wants to heal, the body wants to recover. So please know that you can still do stuff, whether it's nourishment, replenishment, or pelvic floor stuff. But yeah, it'd be like waiting to do stuff or like starting to take birth control after you're pregnant. It's just like that's not the it's like completely missing the mark.
Well, it's also just wild because we've neglected the pelvic floor for so long for most women. And that would be like if we just picked any other muscle group. Like, let's say we're just like, you know what, let's just not worry about our glutes until we're 80. Like,
Yeah.
it would be like picking any other group and just deciding to neglect it.
Yeah.
But specifically the pelvic floor, it does so much for us. And so one of my other big philosophies and just like foundations of my coaching with Fierce Not Fragile is like educate, educate, educate. The more
Mhm.
you know, the better off you're going to be. So
Yeah.
when clients come in on their first eval with me, I ask them like scale of 1 to 5, how well do you even understand the pelvic floor? And like 90% of women are like 1 or 2. I hardly know anything. They know where it is, but like they don't really know what it does. So just even teaching women like what does your pelvic floor do for you? What are symptoms that something is off? What are symptoms that things are going well? All of that can play a really big role too. So I would highly encourage anyone that's listening, no matter where you are in womanhood, to learn as much as you can about the pelvic floor. Start training some of these muscles. It's not just Kegels. Please don't just sit at your stoplight and do 50 Kegels and think that's like pelvic floor.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's my spiel on that. So
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and the work that I did with Amber was awesome. I feel like without that, I would not have known how to relax your pelvic floor. And so if you don't know, you have to know how to relax your pelvic floor during birth because your pelvic floor needs to get the heck out of the way to allow the baby to pass through. It's not pushing the baby out, it's moving out of the way. It's expanding. What is it? Like 250% of its
150
normal?
times percent, yeah, it
Yeah,
lengthens.
it's
So most people think
crazy.
the pelvic floor pushes baby out. It doesn't. It's your
Yeah,
uterus.
yeah.
So when you're sitting there and you're clenching your pelvic floor, which is what most of us do a lot of the time during the day, you're making a hole that needs to get bigger,
Tight.
smaller, and tighter. And then we're like, why isn't labor progressing? Or
Yeah.
women get told all the time, well, your pelvis is too small. Well, is it? Or are we
Yeah.
just putting too much tension down there?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that'd be like trying to shove something in your mouth and not opening your mouth.
Exactly.
You know, it's not going to work and it's probably not going to feel very good. So yeah. So anyways, you have to know how to relax, or it's very, I shouldn't say you have to know. You like ideally should know. Like hopefully we get to a point where women have to know, but you ideally know how to relax your pelvic floor. And Amber's going to teach you guys this hopefully next week.
Yep.
But you have to know how to do that in order to allow the baby to pass through more easily. And then you're not like fighting resistance. It's like the baby's trying to get out, but the pelvic floor is in the way. So, anyways, if I hadn't done this with Amber, I would not have understood hip mobility work. I would not have understood my adductors and abductors. And guys, I'm coming from a fitness background. Like I was in the fitness industry for 5 years. They don't teach this stuff. I was even in Pilates. I was a Pilates instructor, and they still don't teach to this extent. A lot of it's just like squeeze, 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 contract, contract, contract. They don't teach you how to fully relax or keep things in alignment as much. So huge thanks to Amber. And then I did work with Taylor Goldberg. I think I mentioned her in a
Yeah.
past episode. I worked with her starting July 2024, and I worked with her leading into December. So what is that, 5 months? And did a lot of strength training with her. And she knows a lot about pelvic floor stuff too. And we basically like combined the work that I did with Amber, and then Taylor did some other things for me. And so I was really weightlifting for all of 2024. And now being in pregnancy, oh my goodness, do it. Weightlift before you get pregnant, because I spent a good, I think it was almost like 10 weeks without
Yeah,
lifting
not
weights
doing it.
in my first trimester. I definitely lost strength, but like nowhere near what I would have lost if I didn't strength train prior to this. Like I could still do most things pretty well. A lot of it was endurance, but there's some other things too. Like I'm not gonna go and just pick up a barbell right now because I'm not in the shape to do that. Really lightweight potentially, but I'm going to be working with Amber now to start getting that back into my life, because I think, I mean, I haven't lifted it. I don't think I've touched a barbell since December at this point, which is a long time for me now. So anyways, physical training, highly, highly recommend it. You need strength. Women need muscle. Muscle helps like support your metabolism. It helps keep your blood sugar balanced. It's very, very helpful to go into pregnancy strong. Is there anything that you want to add to that? Just because that's definitely your forte.
The only thing I want to add is just strength training in general. We know if we look at all of the, which thankfully we're finally getting better research on it, but the research highly, highly, highly supports the benefit of strength training, one for the pelvic floor, but also there's massive benefits for mom and baby.
Mm-hmm.
Placental health, changes in like decreases the rate of gestational diabetes, hypertension, low birth weight. They've even seen studies in babies that have like better lung capacity with moms that exercise. And it doesn't have to just be strength training, but some sort of movement
Yeah.
makes a really big difference. Strength training in particular, we know is great for the pelvic floor and stuff like that, and your core, because
Yeah.
your core is getting stretched and everything during pregnancy. So being able to strength train really helps with that too.
Yeah.
Reduces pregnancy symptoms quite a bit as far as like aches and pains and stuff like that.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like my biggest aches and pains, and I'll dive into this a little bit more, was more of just like my hips relaxing and widening. It was almost kind of like going through a growth spurt when you're in like your
Yep,
teens, like that feeling. But I don't feel, and I'm 6.5 weeks, I'm not big yet. But I do feel like overall my body has felt pretty good aside for some of the like normal first trimester symptoms. So I do feel like strength training. And now I'm like able to go back in, and I was just doing 35-pound suitcase deadlifts like pretty easily, and like side planks for 30 seconds, which like prior to doing a lot of this work that was hard, and now I'm doing it pregnant, which is cool. So I also just feel like when you're strong as a human, but especially as a woman, it just shows you your strength. Which you need a lot of strength. You need physical strength, mental and emotional strength to go on this journey. And I think however you can train that, whether it's with hiking or, challenging yourself to like reading X amount of books per year, or learning a new language, is showing yourself that you can do hard things, I think is really, really beneficial for pregnancy and birth.
for sure.
Okay, so preconception prep. So, like I said, I've kind of lived like a fertility supportive lifestyle really since 2021, because a fertility supportive lifestyle is supporting your menstrual cycle. And that's a huge thing. Being a woman, it's a huge priority for me and my body. It's not as complicated as you might think. It's not seed cycling, it's not taking all these supplements. It's honestly a lot of what we talked about last episode of just like nourishing yourself and taking care of your body. and that makes a fertile body. Like it's really not that complicated. We'll talk about some other ways to do that and stuff, I'm sure, in future episodes. And then I have some resources that I'll share at the end of this episode. But really, it's like if you make it a lifestyle, then it's not like this in and out of like, oh, I'm in my fertility prep period or I'm out of my fertility prep period. It's like, no, I'm just in my nourishing era, and this era hopefully lasts my whole life, right?
Mm.
Um, so 2023, 2024, I didn't do much different in the first half of the year. I think I like ran some labs. I like would not have acted that differently whether I knew that I was going to get pregnant or not, just because I'm working on hormone balance and my menstrual cycle, which is something that I will always do just to make sure that my body's nice and supported. But then come July 2024, my husband and I decided like, okay, this fall we're open to starting to try to conceive. And it was a very like lax, like, we're probably just going to stop preventing and see what happens. So, but then at that point, I also know, well, if we stopped preventing and see what happens and got pregnant, I want to set that pregnancy up for success. I want to set my body up for success, and I want to set baby's body up for success. I want to make sure my mineral stores, the baby has something to draw from, so then I'm not as depleted or super, super depleted, postpartum. So July 2024, I believe that I ran a pretty decent panel on both myself and my husband. I will put a link to I just did an Instagram post on Wild Muse Wellness about the markers that I look at. So I did that, and then I also ran an HTMA on myself to see what minerals I specifically needed, like see where my body needed detox support, see what nutrients my body specifically needed, so I could really like overdrive and get serious about extra replenishment, because I knew that like I'm going to be drawing from a lot of these stores. The other thing I like to say too is, depending on your first trimester, you might feel really crappy. Like you may not want to eat, you may be puking a lot, so you're actually not getting a lot of your nutrients. So having spent some time before that replenishing your body and refilling nutrients and replenishing your nutrient stores can be really, really helpful, because you might spend all of first trimester not being able to eat the way that you want to or work out the way that you want to or stuff like that. Like you might just be a little bit of a standstill. So the more that you can do before you do that, it just helps optimize and set you up for success. So then July 2024, that is also when I started myself and my husband on some egg and sperm specific support. We opted to do the fertility booster from Fullwell. I do really like them. And one reason why I really like them is the one supplement works for both men and women. So we don't have to have our own supplements. And it was kind of nice to we take that together. So that was one like specific like egg and sperm support that we both did together. I had some other stuff that I was doing. My husband had some other stuff that he was doing. I'll break that down in just a moment. But that was one thing that like we were taking together, and we started taking that in July because it does take around 3 months for the cellular health to change for eggs and sperm. And they're the beginning cells of your baby. They're 50% each of what the future makeup of your baby. And so if you have really strong cells that are really healthy and things can enter them and exit them, and if you've ever heard of mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell, I'm sure everyone knows that phrase. That's the powerhouse of the egg and sperm cells as well. And so we want to improve your cellular health. That plays a huge role in implantation, chemical pregnancy, miscarriage losses, like how pregnancy pans out. Not that you can control every outcome, because you can't, and that's something I'll talk about here soon. But you can help optimize it to help give yourself the best, shot of success. So in July that I ran that panel, and I think in September I actually ran another panel on myself. They're not that big of panels. They're both like $80 or so. So they're not too terrible to do, which is great. And I just wanted to check in on a couple things that I was working on from my July markers. And then October, we decided that was the month that we were going to not prevent. And I ovulated really, really early. So we literally kind of missed it that month, which was kind of weird. And I track my cycle. I've been tracking my cycle for a long time. I just had a weird month. I was also doing acupuncture, and I think my acupuncturist and I were thinking that my visit that day actually like sped up ovulation that day, which was really interesting. So I ovulated on cycle day 9, and I normally ovulate like cycle day 12 or 13. So I wasn't expecting to ovulate that quick. So we just kind of like missed October. Um, and then I'll talk about other months here in just a moment. But that was kind of like our timeline. Amber, is there anything that you can think of that I missed or
I don't think
that'd be good to
so.
touch on? Okay.
I think
So good.
I was gonna say I think you're good.
Good. Okay, cool. So November was actually the first month that we tried, and we actually did get pregnant. Um, and we found out, I think I was probably I think I was like 10 days post ovulation or so when I started like being like, huh, like what's going on here? I think I've actually maybe even had some symptoms earlier at that point. So like some cues, and I'm very intuitive and like I very much so like know my body. So it may have even been like 7 DPO. I think I took a pregnancy test. I like wanted to wait until 14 days post ovulation, but I think I took one at 9, and I think that there was like a really, really, really faint line. And then I waited 2 days. Yeah, we found out 11 DPO now that I think about it. So I was pregnant and we were kind of shocked. And my husband was like, is this real? Like, what's okay? We're pregnant. We did not expect to get pregnant, kind of like our first cycle, because like October was kind of like a missed cycle. Um, and then was pregnant, and I think I didn't really have a lot of like symptoms or anything. I was starting to get a little bit nauseous toward the end of that week. And then unfortunately, I would have been 4.5 weeks pregnant. So that would be, so just so you guys know for like the timeline of pregnancy, because I didn't know this until I do the work that I do, and it gets really confusing. Basically, the way that they count pregnancy is you ovulate, and then like let's say you find out 2 weeks later, just to keep it simple. At that point, you'd technically be 4 weeks pregnant because they're counting the pregnancy from the first day of that menstrual cycle. So I used to think, oh, when someone's 4 weeks pregnant, it was 4 weeks after ovulation because that logically makes sense to me. But really, it would be 2 weeks after ovulation, but it's 4 weeks since your first like your first bleed of that cycle. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I know that, but
It
I
like
think
does,
some
but it
people
doesn't.
get into it. It's like stupid, but yes, it does make
Yeah.
sense.
And it gets really complicated, and we'll probably do like an episode talking about that because it's like, well, what if you don't ovulate on cycle day 14? Then like, are you really 4 weeks pregnant? Or, it just gets kind of messy. But anyways, most women find out about 4 weeks pregnant. Like you could maybe just a little bit sooner or a little bit after. That's typically when your first missed period would be. I was supposed to get my period that Thursday, and so I did miss a whole period. And then it was that Saturday I started spotting, unfortunately. And I think I actually even had like a miscarriage dream, which that kind of comes into play the following cycle. Um, I think I may have had 2 in a row, which was a really weird experience, and then actually starting to bleed. And then that made me almost like think my dreams meant something, which they don't always. And that gets really heady and really emotional. But anyways, I started bleeding and then ended up passing the pregnancy and releasing the pregnancy the next day. So it would have been, I think, about 10 days after we found out that I was pregnant. Really tough. It's hard because doing what I do, I know that you can lose pregnancies, and it's called a chemical pregnancy when it's that early. When it's before 5 weeks, and I was 4 weeks, 5 days. So when it's before 5 weeks, it's technically a chemical pregnancy, and that just means that there was the chemical reaction that the embryo did form, but it probably didn't implant well, or maybe it did implant, but there's something wrong with the chromosomes of the embryo, or maybe there's a progesterone something, or there's a lot of things that can play into that. And we can do a whole episode talking about that if you want. Just let us know. You can message either of us, and we can talk about that more because I know it's an interesting topic. There's a really fine line of like knowing a lot, but then not knowing too much where you think you can control it because you can't control it. So it was tough for sure. That I have had, I don't think in either of our first 2 episodes I talked about like my IUD experience, did I?
No,
No.
no.
So just to like rewind a little bit, April 2021, I had a copper IUD. I didn't have my period for a few months, and I just thought it was like stress and traveling. It ended up being actually that my copper IUD was displaced and I was pregnant, and I just didn't know it, and we weren't trying. I had a copper IUD. I always get that question. I'm like, no, I had birth control. But that was a very like traumatic experience. I was technically 10 weeks pregnant. So I have gone through a miscarriage before. I went through contractions. I labored everything at home and passed everything at home. It was a very interesting experience, kind of looking back at it now, like how intuitive my body was. And if I just like, I didn't know what was happening, so I really had to let my body lead me. And it was a really interesting experience, and it's kind of guiding me on how I'm making decisions now. But, anyways, when I had the chemical pregnancy and releasing that, it wasn't nearly as extreme and as excruciating as when in 2021 because I wasn't nearly as far along. But it definitely it's much more intense than just like a heavy period for me at least. Like I definitely went through spurts of feeling like I was gonna vomit. I had a lot of hot flashes, a lot of cramping. I took spasm. I think it's called spasm, and it's for homeopathic. And that can be really helpful just to kind of help relax some things a little bit. Um, and it lasted for me, I passed everything. We were like checking out of our hotel that day and had to check out at 11, and I was like starting to pass things at 10. It was kind of a crazy experience. Um, but yeah, so it was like an hour, 2 hour experience for me. And then after that, it really did just feel like a period just because it was so early. But that kind of changed some things for me. So at that point, then I went into a little bit of a panic mode of like, oh my God, what if this happens again? And honestly, so long story short, we got pregnant the following month. But that was way more of a heady experience. It was not nearly as like quintessential, oh my God, we're pregnant. And like looking at the pregnancy test together, it was kind of like, we're pregnant. Are we? Are we going to lose it? But we're pregnant. Like, yay, but oh God. And it was just very anticlimactic, honestly. And I feel
So
like
many emotions.
so many emotions. And I
Like
feel like most of
excited but
just,
scared and like grieving
yeah.
all at the same time.
Yeah. And I feel like that's actually something that I've learned with pregnancy. And I think this is like just with motherhood in general. And it probably is with other experiences in life, but I feel like it's so like integrated in pregnancy is feeling two things at once all the time.
Oh yeah.
All
100%.
the time. Yeah.
100%.
It's like you're terrified, but you're excited. You want to get your hopes up, but you also don't want to get your heart broken. Like there's so many things where it's like you're feeling two things at once. So a lot of December was processing the chemical pregnancy and the loss. And then my body ovulated strong and fast. And I wasn't really ready to try again, but I was also not ready to skip that cycle to try again as well. So we did try. And then we got pregnant. And what's really interesting about getting pregnant that quickly after a loss is I think I already had pretty heightened hormones because they hadn't fully cleared after the November loss. So I knew that I was pregnant 3 days post ovulation that time. I both times I had a really, really big anxiety day where I was just like full body physical, felt like I had an elephant on my chest, heightened anxiety. It happened the first time in November and it happened in December, and I was like, I'm pregnant. I just like either this is what my body does now after I ovulate or I'm pregnant. And then I had some other symptoms as well. But it was a really interesting thing. And I think talking about getting pregnant after a loss is something that's really important because it's not that it steals the joy. I don't necessarily want to say that. But it did take me and my husband a lot longer to feel the joy
Oh, for sure.
because we were so like, what's going to happen? You just don't know.
Yeah. You're just still processing, honestly, the loss of the first one.
Hmm.
And like your body so badly wants to be excited, but there's still that in the back of your mind, like, is this gonna work?
Yeah. Yeah. And I, knowing what I know and knowing what I do for work, I was constantly like, I need to get to the root cause. I need to get answers. I need to make sure this doesn't keep happening. So, of course, I ran like a massive blood panel. And like, you guys, I am a woman just like all of you guys. Unfortunately, I have a lot more tools at my disposal than a lot of you guys. So I can almost like dive into things even harder at times. I've like had to learn how to not do that. But so I ordered a big panel. I was like, I have to check my thyroid, and what if my husband and I have like blood clotting issues and stuff like that. So, anyways, that did change how I prepared to conceive the following cycle a little bit. I was a not not necessarily a control freak, but I got a lot more nitty-gritty. Like I looked into I deep dove aspirin and like how that can help things. I started taking Vitex. I looked into like iodine and selenium. So there's a lot of things that I looked into based on my own blood work and my experience. And then my co-practitioner, Katrina, she helped me with a lot of things too. So I wasn't doing this all on my own. And it's not necessarily that I would or wouldn't recommend this. It's just how what happened, like in future pregnancies, I'd like to think that I wouldn't like get so graspy, but then you also just do what you have to do to get through it, right? And that's something that I kept telling myself, and I hope that this is helpful for other ladies that get pregnant after a loss, is the only way through is through. That's just something I kept telling myself. Because there's a lot of phrases that are like, I'm pregnant today, I can't control the future. And I'm like, yeah, that was helpful to hear, but it's like, to me, it was like the only way to get through it is through it. And then I think also having the experience of having a 10-week loss, which I have my own like theories of why I had that loss, that also added its own level of complexity of this current pregnancy, because once I got past that 4 weeks and 5 days, I was like, phew, like I'm feeling a little bit better. But then I was like, well, then what if I have a loss at 10 weeks, like I did in 2021? And that was really heady. And I would say for the first 7 weeks of this pregnancy, I was a little bit of a nutcase just because I was super heady. It didn't feel good. Like I had a lot of pregnancy symptoms, which I'll talk about in a moment. It was really emotional. It was also over the holidays, you guys. Like I literally hit 4 weeks and 5 days pregnant Christmas Eve.
Oh.
And that was when I had the loss last time. So I was like, okay, well, either we're going to be excited and tell our parents, or this is going to be a really, really crappy Christmas Eve and Christmas. And it was a really interesting experience. So I was hoping that like once I got past that point, then I'd feel better. But then like a few weeks later, then I like started getting in my head about a 10-week loss. And I think that's just something that I think whether you have a loss or not, it can get heady and emotional, and it's really easy to do.
I want to add one thing to this too, because I know you and I have talked about this a lot about like morning sickness and just the way that women feel during the first trimester. And I think I don't want to say this and like diminish anyone's feelings, but like we know the power of our brain, we know the power of our
Mm-hmm.
mindset. And if you think about how much society has made women believe like
Yeah.
those first 12 weeks are so scary and there's so much unknown and don't announce it until 12 weeks, that
Yeah.
like I firmly believe that part of the reason that women do feel worse during that first trimester is the fear.
Yeah.
The fear, the anxiety, the doubt of this going to work. Is it's not going to work? Oh, I can't tell people. I can't share
Yeah.
my secret. Like just the weight of that. And
Yeah.
then once that first trimester is over, for most of us, most people start to feel better. And I think part of it is just like that emotional piece goes
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
Like stress does so much to our body, and then you add like stress and anxiety, and it's heavy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
really heavy. And I think that's what shocked me so much with my first trimester is, yeah, I had the physical symptoms and like I said, I'll talk about those in a moment, but it was the emotional, mental aspect that I was not prepared for. And it really felt shocking to me that I wasn't joyful to be pregnant. I was joyful, like of course I was, but it was not like I was like jumping out of my boots, screaming, excited, wanting to tell the world.
Yeah.
I feel like I didn't honestly want to start telling the world up until recently. Because yeah, there is like that constant doubt. And I want to add with the whole 12-week thing, I think it's a really, really big issue that we have now viewed the 12-week mark as the safe mark.
I agree.
Because what if you have a loss at 13 weeks or 20 weeks or 40 weeks?
Which we see.
We see. I have family members that have had losses at 40 weeks,
Yep.
a full term, and I've had family members with a loss at 13 weeks. My grandma had a loss when her baby boy was 2. And this is what around week 7, I'll explain like what kind of led into this, but around week 7, I finally had this aha moment of, I don't want to spend the rest of this pregnancy every single day worried about a loss. And then I don't want to spend every single day of my child's life worried about them dying. Like, what a way to live,
Yep.
So I was really in my head 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and then 7 weeks, I like really lost it. I had a miscarriage dream at the beginning of that week. My husband was going to be gone out of town 2 weeks after that, and I was just terrified that I was going to potentially lose the baby and him not be home, and I was going to be by myself all that week. And I was also struggling with insomnia, so I was tired. Um, and I really, that's like when I was in the thick of it, of feeling pretty crappy with morning sickness. And I had that miscarriage dream. And then I got really, really graspy. Like I was not going to do any ultrasounds until the 20-week ultrasound. And then I'm like, all of a sudden, like messaging my midwife of like, oh, like maybe we do an ultrasound because if I hear the heartbeat, like that means there's only a 1% chance of it not. And it just like, it gets so numerical and data driven, stuff like that. So that happened Monday. I had that dream, and honestly, I was beating myself up that week, like to the point where my husband was like, "Johanna, the amount of stress that you're putting on your body, like I feel like this is gonna sound kind of harsh, but like he meant this in a very loving, like eye-opening reality check of like you're going to cause an issue
Yeah.
because you're stressing yourself out so much." Like
Yep.
he's like, "What if like we didn't know what was going on?" He's like, what if like this is almost like causing the miscarriage because you're so stressed out, right? Like, and I know that probably sounds pretty intense, but it's something that I needed to hear. And I think it's something that a lot of women need to hear. And I think that's where like the male, like logic, analytical aspect can be really beautiful. Um, but anyways, he kind of like said that to me, and I was still like, you don't understand. Like, I can feel these things. I had my dream. And it didn't help that I had two dreams prior to the loss last time. But then that Thursday, and I remember this very clearly, that Thursday I went to the gym and I didn't feel like I pushed it too hard. Um, I did like pretty light compared to what I was used to, but I bled that night. And that was shocking. And I spotted and like my husband was in our office and like ran to him in our office and I'm like, I knew I was miscarrying and like it's happening and I'm bleeding. And I think that's actually when he said the wake up call thing of like, what if, all this stress is causing it? And I cried and I cried and I cried. And I think I pretty much cried all that evening because I was convinced that I was having a loss. And I think even the next morning I was probably crying. And then all of a sudden it hit me that if I'm having a loss, I can't control it. And if I'm not having a loss, I can't control it. So why am I doing this? Why am I dramatizing this? Why am I like making myself so emotional over something that I have absolutely zero control over? And I think that's something that's just, well, yes, we can optimize things. We can replenish our nutrient stores. We can work on our pelvic floor. We can work on our stress. We can optimize our egg and sperm health. We can't control anything, ladies. So it's like, yes, we can optimize and support and nourish and take care, but we can't control. And I think this was like, once I hit that, I have not cried once since about a loss. I have not worried about a loss. I have not, like, it completely, for me, let it go because I was like, there is absolutely no point. Absolutely 100% no point. So that was a huge like turning point for me in that pregnancy, and I've been excited pretty much ever since because I finally let myself stop trying to control it.
Yeah. You finally let yourself enjoy it
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like be excited.
Yeah.
I think that again just goes back to I'm gonna like change the famous saying of like the comparison steals your joy or whatever.
Mhm.
If you look at it in pregnancy, I think fear can steal the
Yeah.
joy.
Yeah.
Fear and stress and anxiety can steal the joy out of it. Or like
100.
I've even talked to women who almost like punish themselves when things
Mhm.
in pregnancy aren't going the right way.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. There's just so much fear. They almost get like frozen by the fear and anxiety, and then they just stop taking care of themselves,
Yeah.
which is obviously the opposite of what we want to do. But at the end of the day, you can't control
Yeah.
what's going to happen. You can do your best to
Mhm.
optimize things, like you said, but
Yeah.
really it's not in our hands.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I don't really view myself as like a controlling person, but I definitely would say that I have controlling tendencies. And I can even look back and like see this in my preconception prep of like, oh, I need to make sure I have XYZ vitamins and like minerals and like I'm eating X amount of food. And like there was a certain aspect of control with that. And I've like lost that so much with pregnancy. And I think something also that I want to touch on is because I was so symptomatic for a lot of my life leading up to now, I had like thyroid issues, gut issues, fatigue, blah, blah, blah. I was so used to my body not working and to not it like quote unquote failing, which it wasn't failing. But something that's been really cool about pregnancy is my body is doing it and it's working and it's just showing me like how I'm gonna get emotional, how cool and capable my body is. And I feel like this is the first time that I'm like I'll like check my pregnancy app and it's like you might be experiencing this week, and I do, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like right on track with the norm. And it's just really showing me of like my body can do it. My body's been doing it this whole time. You know, like my body has always been working for me this entire time, and pregnancy has really been like a way to like see that, which has been really cool. So,
The quote, the life happens for you, it doesn't happen to you.
yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Like your body is so much more capable and resilient than a lot of time we give it credit.
100%.
And when we start giving it the credit and believing in its resiliency, it's amazing what happens.
Yeah. 100%. And recognizing it,
Yeah.
you know, and just like appreciating it too. Really appreciating it. So yeah, so I've actually really like chilled out a lot since I've been pregnant, which is kind of cool. Like I really am just like trusting food and trusting like my instincts on like what my body needs versus what it needs. Like I'm not necessarily on like a set day-to-day regimen for supplements anymore because I'm just like, I'll take this sometimes and I'll take that sometimes. And what was my diet like today? And you know, and it's been a really interesting swap for me of like feeling like I have to hit this structure and it like, no, I just can do what works for me and listen to my body, which has been a cool thing for sure. Okay, we're gonna like run long, so I feel like I'm gonna try to like speed this along a little bit. Meal prepping. So a couple things that we did for my husband was the fertility booster from Fullwell. Focus on him sleeping well, hydrating well, eating enough, basics. I did have him like avoid saunas and hot tubs and stuff like that, just because that can like crush your sperm. We did do a sperm test, but we didn't do it until December, and I was already pregnant. So good to know that he had good sperm, but it was a little late. Like I would highly recommend like doing like the sperm testing. Like I should have done it in
Really?
July, not like when I was already pregnant. But that was me getting graspy of like, oh my God, we just had a loss. Like, let's do a sperm test, you know? And ideally, if a male can work on foundational health for 6 to 12 months at minimum, like do it together, guys. Like this is such a great opportunity to work together as a partnership. Like if you are with your male partner that you're going to be reproducing with, work on it together. And even if you're in like a same sex relationship, like you guys can still work on fertility stuff together too, even if it's not like both of your guys' cells coming together to make a human, right? But just work at it like as a partnership. I feel like once I started wanting and once my husband got involved in things, it took so much pressure off of me because I'm like, oh, it's not just a me thing. It's an us thing. And we need to get pregnant together. It's not Johanna gets pregnant, right? It's like we're getting pregnant. It's our baby. It's 50% him, 50% me. Plus, sperm health plays a huge role in like the placenta quality and morning sickness and in potential miscarriage and loss and stuff like that too. So it's really, really important. I wanted to give a background of the chemical pregnancy because that also leads me into my early pregnancy symptoms. They were real fast, real quick, and I think it's because I already had a lot of hormones in my body from the first pregnancy. Something else I want to say too, and I don't necessarily know if this is always as helpful to hear, especially if you're in it, but I do think it's helpful to know. A lot of women miscarry their first pregnancy. A lot of them. And I almost have like a hunch or a theory that it's like the body kind of learning what to do. It's like you're asking your body to do something that's never done before, and sometimes it goes really well, like in your case, and then other times it doesn't. But a lot of women, like I would say a lot of the ladies that I have in my life that have had babies before, mass majority of them have had a loss in some way prior to having a successful pregnancy. And so I think like the whole stat of like it's 1 in 4 pregnancies that end in loss, like I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually more. And people just may or may not know they're actually pregnant. But my early pregnancy symptoms, I had a runny nose. Like my left nostril was constantly runny. And that can be a symptom, which is interesting. Pretty much all of December, I had a runny nose and was congested. I am still congested. That's been a constant symptom for me. I did have the high anxiety 3 days post ovulation. That was really quick. And then I pretty much had breast tenderness and nausea from that point. Nausea was pretty manageable in December, and then January it was definitely affecting my life a lot more. And I also experiencing some insomnia. So I was waking up like 2 to 3 a.m. or so most days. I think pretty much like once I hit 5 weeks pregnant. Until now, still navigating that one. I will tell you where I'm at with that to help you guys if anyone else is dealing with insomnia. Is there anything else that I should talk about for early pregnancy stuff, and then I can talk about first trimester recap.
I think you're good to keep going.
Okay. So I would say weeks 5 to 9 were my hardest for sure. Like this is when I was constantly texting Amber of like, what do I do? Is this normal? Is that normal? And remember, like these are the first time, like for first time moms, this is the first time your body's going through something. And weird things happen and you don't know whether things are normal or not. So it's really nice to have friends that have done it before, especially Ambers that have worked with this population too. So I also gained 20 pounds in those 4 weeks real fast. She packed it on there real fast, and that was shocking. And I definitely texted Amber because I was like, holy crap, I've already gained 20 pounds. Is this going to continue? And what did you tell me? Just so other people know.
Most women do have a spike, then it plateaus. Then eventually, when you get closer to the third, it does tend to go up a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. And then some women lose weight first trimester because of morning sickness or nausea or whatever it is. And then they'll start gaining weight second and third trimester. So the weight gain kind of happens.
One thing I want to throw in too is depending on how lean or not lean you are, like the standard recommendation, I hate that there's even a standard recommendation of like 15 to 25 pounds. There are women that gain like no weight.
Yeah.
And that's fine for them because they have more fat storages and don't need as much. If you come into pregnancy a lot leaner, you do tend to need to get more. There's other, nuances and factors, but just kind of keeping that in mind of like this standard they give everybody is,
yeah,
it's quite
I mean,
the
I
range.
almost blew past that standard in 4 weeks.
Exactly.
So.
Like everything's different. Yeah.
Yeah. And I honestly noticed a lot of the weight gain. It was definitely tummy. But then like my boobs have gone through 3 growth spurts, you guys.
Oh yeah.
Massive. It happened so fast. That was one of like 5 week, I think it was 5 weeks. I was like, holy cow, they grew. And then I think probably like 9 or 10 weeks they grew again. And then they just went through another growth spurt. I also got boob stretch marks, which is something that I didn't know would happen so early. So heads up for the ladies that might are either haven't gotten pregnant yet or earlier in pregnancy than me. But yeah, that was boobs. They were very sore, very big. Yeah, yeah. Stretch marks was surprising because I don't know. Like I didn't have that on my radar. Like I was thinking stretch marks like when I started breastfeeding, but I didn't have that on my radar for now. And I'm like, they're only gonna get bigger.
It's wild what happens to our body. Like everyone is so different. I don't want to say this to brag because I'm just genetically lucky. I have zero stretch marks. It was not because of lotion. It was not because of my mother has none either. She's had 4 kids. I am just genetically blessed in that. But then like you get them super early. Like you never know. And again, you can't control it.
Yeah, you can't control
How
it.
did you do that? What lotion did you use? I'm like, it's not lotion, people.
It's not lotion. I am using a lotion because I was like, well, I don't want to make it worse.
Yeah, I did too. But I don't think there's any magic.
It's not no, I agree. I'm using the 8 sheep.
Yep, they're amazing. I use them too. Yep.
Yeah. The 8 sheep belly serum and then belly butter or whatever. It's like $80. It seems insane, but I'm also like, like if it helps, it helps. I haven't had any itchiness on the stretch marks on my boobs, which was nice. Or maybe a little bit, but nothing crazy.
You're really itchy. Yeah. The lotion help a lot with the itch and stuff.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So now I'm currently using the serum on my stomach, my low back, my inner thighs, my outer thighs, and my boobs, because those are all the areas that my friends have had stretch marks in. And I'm like, well, if I can support any of them, I'm going to do that. So I am using that. That was a little bit of an investment for me, but I definitely am going to do that. Weeks 5 to 9, I constantly felt like I needed to pee. I was also constantly starving and felt like I couldn't eat enough, but then also nothing sounded good. I was really lucky at that time frame. Animal protein sat with me really well, so protein was not an issue for me. But then it was weird once I hit 10 weeks, then I'm like all of a sudden protein was kind of hard. So things constantly change. I think the biggest thing to know is things always change, and this is like basically from conception all the way through motherhood is everything is temporary. So just know that it's temporary and it will change before you know it. Weeks 10 through 12, things definitely started to get a little bit better. But I was still like throughout that entire time, morning sickness was definitely a thing. I never threw up, which I'm very thankful for. There was like 1 or 2 times where I got really close because of a really, really bad smell. But overall, like I didn't throw up, but I constantly felt The way I like to explain it is like when you're hungover and you wake up in the morning and you're really, really bad, and then like after noon or so, and you start to feel a little bit better, and you're like, okay, I kind of want a burger, but if I eat that burger too fast, I might get sick. Like that's how I felt for 12 weeks. It wasn't like the super terrible hangover, but it was like that, like just not feeling very good for about 12 weeks. Um, I'll talk about some things that I used to help with the nausea. Once I hit 12 weeks, we heard the heartbeat at 12 and a half weeks, and I feel like a lot of things changed for me at that point. This is actually really interesting, like tying it back to the mental emotional, what you were talking about, Amber, of like first trimester not feeling good. I
See?
immediately at 12 and a half weeks, I heard the heartbeat, and I'm like, it was all worth it. It was fine. It wasn't that bad. I can do it again.
Yes.
And I felt so much better after that point. And then from 12 and a half weeks to 15 weeks, I did feel a lot better. And then once I hit 15 weeks, I hit 15 weeks a week and a half ago, and I like feel much more like my normal self. My work capacity, like my ability to work, I feel like increased around like 11 or 12 weeks or so, but pretty much all of January, which I was 5 to 10 weeks in January. I was like working an hour or two a day. I was binge watching a ton of Netflix. I could sleep 14 hours and still be exhausted. Um, just kind of doing what I had to do to get through it. There's, it was hard. Like it's definitely really hard. There's the mental emotional aspect that we've touched on, and then the physical aspect. And I'm going to say something that sounds really, really intense, but I know other moms have experienced it as well. And I think it was helpful for me to hear when I was going through it is it got so hard, and I think this happened around week 9. It got so hard for me that there were times that I wish it would just end. Like I would have been okay with a loss because it meant it was over, and I didn't, because at that time you have to remember, like, you don't know if you're going to feel better at 10 weeks or if it's going to be another 7 weeks, or if it's going to be the rest of pregnancy for some ladies. So I think that's what was daunting for me is I didn't know where my end goal, like my finish line was of not feeling good. And I was like, oh my God, like what if this is another month? Like it could just be over now if it was a loss, and that would be okay. And that sounds so intense and so dramatic, but when you're in it, I had that thought. I've had friends with that, excuse me, with that thought. I think that's a very normal thought when you're so uncomfortable for so long and you don't know how much longer you have to do it.
Oh, for sure. I think it's a totally valid point. I know I had both. I had that thought more. Both my pregnancies were different. I think I felt a lot sicker with my first pregnancy than with my second. And I was working full time. And I remember just being so exhausted. And same thing, you're like, and none of my friends were pregnant at the time. I was one of our like first friends to get pregnant. So I had no one to really ask.
Yeah.
So you're like Googling and it's like, it gives you a million answers. So yeah, you don't know when the end is.
Yeah.
It's hard to feel hopeful when you don't know when the hope will come.
Yeah, totally. Because like some ladies, they feel like crap all 40
Oh
weeks.
yeah.
And you're like, I am a quarter of the way through and I have to do this for another 30 weeks, like that's intense. Or
I
like,
have friends right now that have been pregnant,
oh,
that have been sick their entire
oh
pregnancy.
my God. And I feel so like my heart goes out to women that have HG, which is basically where they have like extreme morning sickness, like they're puking 10 to 20 times a day. Like, oh my God, God bless you. Like, I never puked. And I just feel like the frustration of like vomiting after you just ate and it's hard enough to even get yourself to eat and then you puke it up and then you like didn't get any of the nutrients or nourishment from that. Like financially, that's annoying. Like
Well, and it's scary
nutrient-wise,
because
it's
like,
annoying and it's
am I like
scary.
getting food to my baby? Am I not? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so really intense. So I do feel like compared to how first trimesters can go, I had it pretty good. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't still a very, very challenging thing for me. Like it very much so humbled me. I have a totally different outlook of when people are going through first trimester. Um, and really the phrase that got me through it was the only way through it is through it. And that's just kind of what I did. So I want to dive in, spend like 5 minutes or so talking about specific symptoms, and then we can wrap up if that sounds good to you.
Yeah,
Okay.
sounds good.
So specific symptoms, nausea. Basically, yeah, from weeks 5 through about 14. Like I think I even experienced some nausea, like leading up even to like week 15. But it was way, way more feasible. Like once I got to February, like once I got past week 10, it was like so much more. Like I could navigate it and handle it. January was pretty intense. Gum was honestly like my best friend, like chewing a piece of mint gum. was so, so helpful. I use xylitol gum, so helpful. I think just having that constant mint was really, really helpful for me. Um, I've heard that from other ladies too. That is something that like I will always have gum around in future pregnancies. Vitamin B6, and I'd say getting it in either a lozenge, a chewable, or a liquid form. The tablets did not work for me. And I didn't realize it. I was taking B6 and it wasn't working. And Amber was like, oh, I had chewables. And knowing what I know because of what I do for work, I was like, oh, that's because it was dissolving into her bloodstream in her mouth versus having to go into her gut to absorb. Game changer. So once I switched to a lozenge, or I actually took my powder capsules and broke them into water. That doesn't taste the best, but it's not terrible. Swirled it around to dissolve it and then held it in my mouth for about 10 seconds to allow it to absorb through my skin tissues in my mouth. Game changer. I was taking 25 milligrams anywhere from 2 to 4 times a day. What's interesting is it only worked for about 14 days or so. And then I think my stores were kind of replenished. And then my nausea was there, but it wasn't as bad. But B6 wasn't helping anymore. And then I went a couple weeks not taking B6. And then once I got to around like, I think 13 or 14, I started taking B6 again and it started helping again. So it's kind of an interesting thing. It wasn't always helpful for me, but I know it was really helpful for you pretty
It's
much the
super
whole time,
helpful.
right?
Yep. So with both kids, I took it up until 10 weeks, and then I was able to get off of it at that point and felt fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. And I think B6, if you're not like, when you get off of it, you can still get B6 in a complex and like a B complex. And I highly recommend like liquid B complexes or lozenges or whatever it might be because it's going to absorb a little bit better for you. But I do ideally typically like all the B vitamins to be in a complex together because they need each other to be absorbed. But in this specific situation, it was kind of like taking an Advil for a headache. Like
Yeah,
you knew when your B6 was running out.
totally.
And it was really interesting. Lemon water was really helpful for me. I would do either just plain lemon water or lemon in sparkling water, and that was really helpful. I was noticing like pretty big like blood sugar dysregulation for me in the first trimester too, and that would contribute to nausea. So honestly, just eating. And I know that's like the hardest thing to do when you don't feel good, but the best way that I give support with this, and I say this super lovingly, is you're an adult. And luckily, you can force yourself to eat, and you just kind of have to do it. And I think our society, unfortunately, we baby ourselves a little bit of like, oh, I don't feel good. I'm going to skip a meal because we don't value meals, right? We don't understand the nutrients with it. But eating, like that was literally like a huge thing for most of my symptoms. Fatigue was a big one. That's pretty common first trimester. Sleeping helped my fatigue. Surprise, surprise.
What a
So
guess.
I prioritize sleep. I prioritize naps. And then eating enough before bed helped me sleep well and get through the night. Insomnia was something I am still experiencing. That's been kind of like it ebbs and flows a little bit. Sleep Calm from Boiron was really helpful. It's a homeopathic. I personally felt okay taking it. It is I don't know if I should say that it's pregnancy safe because I don't want someone to like do it and then like come at me, but it's most often very safe for most populations. So I felt safe taking it. My clients have felt safe taking it. I'll say that way. Sleepy nights from Wish Garden Herbs. Awesome, especially if you don't want to drink a sleepy time tea before bed because you're going to feel like you have to pee all the time. The tincture was really, really great. And eating enough was huge for insomnia. You will wake up if you run out of blood sugar, if you run out of fuel, and you need enough fuel to get through the night. And that's been a really big game changer. I would notice anytime we ate out for dinner, I would sleep really well that night. And I'm like, oh, I need to eat higher calories at night, which is it's definitely a time where you need to eat a lot of calories. Your body is doing a very demanding work. Constipation, it's a pretty common one for a lot of people. I like never went, I think I pooped every day still, but I felt much more constipated. I may have like gone like a day or two here or there without pooping. But there's some days they're like, man, I only pooped one time this week or one time in 2 weeks. I'm like, holy cow. Do things to support that. Lemon water is awesome. Milk thistle is great. Work with a provider for that though. Magnesium is also awesome. I also use magnesium oxide. It is much more of a laxative. Um, I'm just going to leave that there. You can work with a provider or you can even message me and I can give you some thoughts about that one. Emotional symptoms. We talked about this, but releasing desire to control and really realizing that it was out of my hands and I didn't want to spend every day worrying was a really big way that I worked on the emotional aspect. And I also think communicating my needs to my spouse and or friends, and like especially if I was feeling more sensitive, like I would text my husband and say like I'm having a bit of a day, like please be easy on me or please be gentle with me or something along those lines. Um, and that was really helpful. Like they don't know what they don't know, and oftentimes they just want to help. Also, just getting through it. Like I've been saying, if the only way through it is through it, and that was, a huge part of the emotional aspect is I just kind of had to process and go through a lot of things during my first trimester. Acid reflux and heartburn. I never actually had the acid reflux where it was like coming up, but my stomach would burn a lot. It was a really interesting thing. But I took to help with that 1 capsule of Masszymes from Bioptimizers. I'm not going to say whether it's pregnancy safe or not. I felt comfortable with it in my own body, though. I only took 1 capsule a day, though, and I always took it with a meal. Apple cider vinegar before meals can be helpful, kind of depending on you and your body, see how it goes. And then in really rare situations, I only did this once, and I wouldn't recommend it all the time, but if you just had like a tomato sauce that's just really burning your stomach, half a teaspoon of baking soda and water can really be helpful to help neutralize some of that acid. Anything else that you can think of?
Honestly, no, that was incredibly thorough.
Good.
No, that sounded great.
Good. Good. I've had crazy dreams. That's just kind of part of it. Um, I was texting a girlfriend that's going to be conceiving here soon, and I'm like, everything's wet. Your vagina, your armpits, your nose, everything is wet. There's more mucus everywhere. So kind of be prepared for that. But yeah, I feel like those are the main symptoms that a lot of people experience.
One other weird symptom that I will say I had with my least favorite symptom of all, but I get the worst acne.
Mm,
Not on my face, people, but on the back of my thighs and my butt.
yeah, I have a friend that had that too.
So dumb. It was like
Did you
my
ever figure out what caused it or how to help it?
no.
Yeah. And she
Yeah,
hasn't been able to
so
either.
there's weird stuff too because like back then, so I had it with both kiddos. It was worse with Bo than it was with Emmy, which is interesting. But I've now it'd be interesting if I ever decided to get pregnant again if it was the same because I've switched so much of like
Yeah.
everything we use in our household.
Yeah.
Like, what I put on my skin is different. Like everything has changed. So it'd be interesting to know if any of that plays a role or if it was just, I don't know, something weird hormonally. But yeah,
Well, it happened with
out
Bo.
like crazy. Both.
It happened with both. But you said
Both
worse with Bo?
worse
Because
with
my
Bo.
friend had a boy. So I'm wondering if
Way worse
maybe
with
there could
Bo.
be like a connection with
It
testosterone.
could. It was way worse with Bo. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. The thing that I recommended for her, so you guys could try it, is hypochlorous acid. It sounds really intense, but it's
Oh, I
very
use that on my
gentle.
face. I
It's
do that.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
try it. Well, not you now,
that's a
but
good idea.
yeah, for other ladies, try that. The other thing that I was just thinking of too is in basically weeks like 4 through 8, 4 through 9 or so, your immune system actually suppresses to allow for the baby to implant and start to grow. You don't want your body to reject it with its immune system. So you can actually get a flare up of immune system symptoms. So like I got some random like skin bumps and um like I know women can get like yeast infections. I don't think I actually had one. I felt like there was something else that I had a little bit of a flare up. So like
I
just
got a yeast
know,
infection. I got a yeast infection with Bo.
yeah, and yeast infections are pretty common. BV is pretty
Oh, I just
common.
kidding. I didn't get a yeast infection. I got a bladder infection.
Oof, ouch.
I got a bladder infection with Bo.
Okay.
Early on. I got a bladder.
Yeah, and that could just be because you had that bacteria that was gonna,
Yep,
your immune system wasn't holding it back anymore. So there's a lot of things that you can do to support those. I'm not gonna cover that because there's so many symptoms that you could have with that, but working with someone like myself or a midwife or whoever you might want to work with can be really helpful. The hard part is you're navigating a lot of this before you even start your prenatal care.
totally.
And so working with someone like myself or just even a friend or whatever it might be, can be really helpful to help navigate through some of these things.
Sweet.
Okay, well, this ran long. Surprise, surprise.
I know.
Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. I did want to drop some resources. We'll link them in the show notes. But I do have Wild Muse has a 90-day fertility checklist. This gives you a action step to work on each week and then also highlight some fertility specific foods that's really great for both men and women that you guys can do together. I would do this like it's 3 months of suggestions and stuff. I tried to keep it very easy to implement. Start it like 6 to 9 months before you want to conceive. So then you have those habits built for a while before you actually conceive. But I'll link for that. I can't remember the price. I think it's like 27-ish.
That
I
sounds
think.
right.
Yeah, it's in that range. It's all DIY. It's very easy to implement. It's very pretty, in my opinion. And then I also have an online course called Hormone Balancing Blueprint. This is going to teach you a lot more about like blood sugar regulation, digestion, stuff about your menstrual cycle. So a lot of the stuff that I talked about today of like the prep that I did, that I've been doing since 2021, it's really in that blueprint. And so it's an online course. It's self-paced. You get lifetime access. I'll put a link for that as well. It's a really awesome starting point. We actually have all of our one-on-one clients go through it alongside working with us just because it's so foundational in the information. And then Amber, do you have any resources for like preconception and early pregnancy stuff?
Yep, I have two. So one is my birth planning ebook. This one is completely free. I'll drop the link for that one. And then my second one is my birth prep and postpartum recovery guide, which I recommend to literally everyone. I don't remember the price on it. I want to say it's like I'd have to look what the price is. It's not. But anyway, that one's going to give you the basics on the pelvic floor. It's going to give you some basics on what postpartum is going to look like, just some very foundational stuff, what to expect during pregnancy that I think all women need to know. There's videos. It's a lifetime access download as well. So we'll put the links for that in there.
Awesome. Cool. We will have my midwife come on here in a few episodes, and we're going to talk a lot more about, birth options and types of care throughout pregnancy and stuff like that. So we'll dive more into that. We'll do a follow-up. I want to do a late pregnancy check-in, and then we'll do a postpartum episode as well, just because I feel like that deserves its own space. So more to come. Hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please reach out to either of us, and we will see you guys next time.
Okay.
Bye.
That's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you for hanging out with us on the Wild and Fierce podcast. If you loved this conversation, we'd be so grateful if you left a review and shared it with a friend who needs to hear this.
And if you really loved it, take a screenshot, share it on your stories, and tag us. We'd love to see it. Until next time, stay wild, stay fierce, and keep owning your journey.